Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on what time zone in which you've joined us. But I do want to welcome you to this webinar sponsored by a number of people, which I'll say in a moment. I'm Dr. Manu Platt. I'm an associate professor in the Joint Department of Biomedical Engineering. That's joint between Georgia Institute of Technology and Emory University. And I'd like to welcome you to another installment of the Amplified series. Amplified, Race and Reality in STEM aims to give a national platform to speakers and to have candid conversations about race and diversity in the STEM fields. It was launched this year as a part of Gladstone's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this series is hosted in partnership with Georgia Tech, the Molecular Engineering and Sciences Institute at University of Washington, and the University of Texas at Austin. And we really hope these discussions will spark change throughout the sciences. This event is currently being live streamed on Facebook and also being recorded. The recording will be available after the event on Gladstone's YouTube page. So when the Q&A will happen at the end, I will be turning over the Q&A duties to Todd McDevitt, Senior Investigator at Gladstone, and he'll be taking over the run of Q&A after our wonderful talk from Dr. McGee. And you can submit questions anytime during the talk by using the Q&A button. If you're watching on Facebook Live, please submit your questions in the chat, and our moderator will share them with Todd and the speaker. And we'll try to get to as many questions as we can, and our speakers really gassed up about the Q&A discussions afterwards. Also, on your social media, please follow the conversation using the hashtag #AmplifiedSTEM. And next in our series, please join us on October 22nd with Tyrone Porter, and he will be speaking as part of the Bay Area Science Festival, and you can also register for that at gladstone.org. But now, I get to introduce our speaker. But before I do that, first and foremost, I do want to mention Breonna Taylor. We still speak your name. We mourn with your family and friends. We are in pain behind the way you're being disrespected as though your life did not matter. It matters to me, and it's a shame that there's still so many that must be convinced that Black lives matter and that we must protect Black women. So I just wanted to make sure we speak that. But that talks about leading to another amazing Black woman that we're going to hear from today. And it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Ebony McGee. She's Associate Professor of Diversity and STEM Education at Vanderbilt University's Peabody College, but she wasn't born that way. She took a long route to get there, and I think it's quite exciting to hear that for young people. I've known her for years from NSBE meetings, network meetings, the Academic Research Leadership Network, and then just being Black faculty in engineering. We're still a small group, and we know and support each other. But I made the mistake one time of speaking after her at a panel that we were both on. It's hard to come behind Ebony. So I'm glad today that I get to introduce her and go before her and leave the behind the other people. But just briefly, her background. She got her bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from North Carolina A&T University, fellow HBCU alum, love to see it. She's also a member of Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated. And after her bachelor's degree, she went on to get a master's in industrial engineering at NJIT, where she was also a GEM fellow. So there's lots of GEM fellows out there doing great work. Then she went to work as an electrical engineer actually for about 5 to 6 years before coming back to get her PhD at the University of Illinois at Chicago in mathematics education. Since then, she's taken off. Her studies are about racialized experience and racial stereotypes with an unapologetic focus on Black folk in these places and spaces, which I celebrate. She also was a winner of the NSF Career Award, where she really was investigating marginalization, undercutting of success in STEM through psychological stress. And she probably will speak on a few of that today. But I also want to celebrate, she formed a super group with Dr. Monica Cox, who at the time was chair of engineering ed at Ohio State University, superhero in her own right, where they really founded this center called Edified, Explorations in Diversifying Engineering Faculty Initiative. So I'm not gonna take too much more time, but I also wanna do one final plug. Dr. McGee's first solo authored book has a similar title to our talk today, Black, Brown, Bruised, How Racialized STEM Education Stifles Innovation. It will be available in October 2020, not far away. So let's please be sure we check it out and support her. But I'll turn over the stage to you, Dr. McGee. Welcome, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you so much, Manu. I was just thinking what a hard act you are to follow. So it's great that we have such admiration for each other. So I thank you. Please feel free to tweet. My tweet is @RelationshipGap. And let's get started. So Just give me a moment here. Black women get punched by racism every day, but some days we actually get knocked out. And yesterday, I thought of Breonna Taylor and I thought of anti-Blackness, which is a cultural regard and disgust with the Black body. It's a denial of humanity and the full citizenship of Black women. And I was horrified by the fact that a white woman's property had more value than a Black woman's body and life. So I really planned on being joyous and vivacious, and I'm still going to try. But you must also know that I am traumatized, and I am presenting today in a state of trauma that never really ends, but is certainly heightened today. Okay, with that, let's get started. So I will let you read the agenda. I also want to tell you that I have a lot more on my slides that I can't talk about within 45 minutes. If you see something that you want to raise that were on my slides, just take a quick snap pic of it and then write your question in the chat. And of course, everything is in the book. So this is the slide I see the most when it comes to underrepresentation in STEM. It's a few years old, so the numbers may have gone up 1% or 2 or down 1% or 2, but it basically talks about underrepresentation in STEM from the undergraduate perspective. But I am much more interested in a slide like this, in statistics like this. One will spend double-digit years, most likely getting a bachelor's, master's, and a PhD in a STEM field, secure a STEM job, and then leave said STEM job within 5 to 7 years, disproportionately more than their white and Asian counterparts. Like, who does that? Who spends multiple decades sometimes getting the highest degree in the land, even possibly completing a postdoc just to leave within 5 to 7 years? And why is this happening more historically with people of color and women? And under women, Black women are the most likely to leave. Not only do they leave their STEM employers, they leave STEM. So this slide is much more interest to me as to why we have numbers on the undergraduate level where 2/3 leave. I mean, it's all important, but you know, this is so perplexing to me. And this is how I started my career, trying to understand that statistic and this one. When I first entered Vanderbilt in 2012, I was fixated with one statistic, that African American engineering faculty were somewhere between 2.5 and 2.7, depending on which publication you look at. And here I am many years later, and Black engineers are still at 2.4, 2.5%. And although in the last 10 years, there have been 4,250 faculty members, only 79 of them have been Black. Let me say that again. Only 79 out of 4,250 engineering faculty have been Black. So it is very likely that one of any race can go through an entire engineering program and never see a Black tenure or tenure track professor. So this is shameful. But one of the things that I had to do in better understanding what happened is I had to take a history class. The history of STEM in the US typically starts with Sputnik. 1957, Russia got to space before us. And I mean, Sputnik was a thing. Okay, I'm with you. But what about the US engineering and industry that was founded on slavery and genocide? And I'm thinking of the scholar Craig Wilder in his book, Ebony and Ivy, talking about the design of slave ships, where 600 enslaved men, women, and children were forced to live horizontally, to just so many horrendous things that they had to go through. And the development of the cotton industry, the development of buildings, even of monuments celebrating white supremacy, Black labor, and Black intellectual labor has been involved. And when we think about our indigenous brothers and sisters, how they were poisoned, there were chemicals behind that. That's science. And I really want to impart that we need to understand this history, this sordid history of STEM, to really understand the current challenges in STEM that we face. We also need to understand race. And I like the framework that Dorothy Roberts presents, because we often say race is a social construct. What does that mean? We have to break that down. But we as STEMers, we know what an invention means. We know what it means to invent something. And race was an invention. It was invented and reinvented some more. So we have an evolution of race, but race is still, it continues to be an invention. And fields like STEM, fields particularly like medicine, hide behind this do good science when they were founded under eugenics and scientific racism and the like. And even when I think about COVID, and I think about how states were developing policies, including the state of Tennessee, about who ventilators would be given to if there was a scarcity, and how those policies were ableist, classist, and racist, where Black folks automatically got demoted because of our pre-existing conditions. So this is how race continues to invent ourselves, even in our current atrocities. So now, and Black folks have known this for a long time, particularly groups like Black in AI, Black in engineering, Black in computing. But now it is widely accepted that technology for facial recognition is racist. But we need to understand the history of facial recognition. In 1931, there was a law that said when Black folks and indigenous folks walked around at night, they had to carry lanterns in order for the police or anybody who was deputized to be the police could recognize them, control them, and surveillance them. So the history of facial recognition has a long history, and a lantern in 1731 was a technology. So we need to really understand how this complicated history can lead us to reproducing some of the same racist ideologies that were produced hundreds of years ago. The other thing that I want to impart to the audience is something that Rochelle Gutierrez told me, professor at the University of Illinois, is that we really need to check our superiority complex in STEM. Why are we seen as superior to other fields? What makes that so? And how is it limiting us from benefiting from the knowledge that these other fields can impart on STEMers to make STEM better? You know, why aren't we listening to the folks in the humanities or the social scientists or fiction writers like Afrofuturism writers? Why aren't we listening to the vast, more holistic ways of which technology can be operationalized? And we understand that STEM universities, departments and colleges were founded under warfare and economics. So again, this whole controlling domain is foundational to STEM. And the message that we want to be the world superpower, we want to be China. I mean, folks of color ain't feeling that. You know, we want to build better communities. We want our society to be better for us. And we want to use technology and innovation to do that. And then what about those that we lost? There is no talk that I do where at least a few folks of color come and tell me with great emotion, as if it happened yesterday, about them changing their major out of STEM, about loving STEM, but STEM not loving them back. And sometimes they talk about the STEM and the STEM curriculum, which I'm going to speak on in a minute, but they often talk about that they've been asked in many very subtle and covert ways to kind of leave your identity at the door. And if you can't leave your identity at the door, you won't be successful in STEM. And there's the residue that people still feel today over having to compromise parts of their identity that they love in order to be successful in this field. And I wonder how many Dr. Mae Jemisons have we lost? And why are we not trying to better understand the loss of these STEMers of color? These are folks that did not need to be convinced that STEM was for them. And we just kind of discard them. And even I discarded them because I said in my research, I only want to look at those who are successful. I just thought it would make a problem-free life for me to just look at those who have, quote unquote, the traditional forms of success. But even there, it's still not enough. So as you hear scientists who are celebrated throughout the country, you hear that they're still troubled. They still are treated as anomalies. They're still stereotyped. They still feel as though they have to prove themselves. And I don't think that these perceptions are without validity, because when you look at the highest ranks of scientific awards, the Nobel Prize, they're not there. They're not there. And women are barely there. So you can do fantastic things and still be not awarded for your science. And that's bad for science. That's bad for diversity. That stifles innovation and limits creativity. And then when I think about big tech, I think about how in the world can they continue to get away with so lowly numbers of Black techs or STEMers, lowly numbers that are comparable to Latinx, who are just a few points higher in some cases and a few percentages lower in others. How can you get away with this? Is this not a display of white supremacy? Even the police department, nationally speaking, has 13% of their officers Black. Y'all can't do better than the police? The very tumultuous and racialized police department, tech can't do better than that. And it's not like these folks haven't done a lot in the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, achieving quantum supremacy, buying LinkedIn, Apple came up with all sorts of products. So we know that these companies know how to do certain things, but they don't seem to know how to hire or retain Black and brown tech workers. I also want to interrogate what these folks have been taught. Now, when we have courses like cultural psychology or ethnic studies, These courses are highly politicized and are viewed through that lens. They're almost viewed as opinions versus layers of research on race, racism, cultural, ethnicity, right? So they're not given the same credibility as courses like physics, thermodynamics, biology, right? And these courses can hide under the larger STEM narrative that positions itself as innocent, objective, universal, and neutral. However, I argue that these courses are actually courses in white studies. These courses' foundation is during the Jim Crow era, where my grandmother had to drink water out of a different, more inferior water fountain, had to go into the back door to get food at a restaurant. This is when these courses were formed. And of course, they've been reinvented, but the foundation is still white, male, heterosexual, able-bodied, Christian, or maybe even atheist, upper to middle class. We have to interrogate these courses as not being neutral, not being universal, and not being problem-free. So with all that background information, I was ready to start my initiative, along with my co-founder, Dr. William Robinson, who is Vice Provost of Academic Achievement at Vanderbilt University. We founded Explorations in Diversifying Engineering Faculty. And the reason why we wanted to focus on engineering faculty so specifically is the faculty train the folks who work at Google, train the folks who work at Microsoft. And we knew that a small cohort of faculty of color who train and teach thousands of others, who trains and teach thousands of others, could really change the field and change whose knowledge and what knowledge is valuable. So, and that's me with the roller skates, because I'm a full person. I just don't do academic research. So one of the first things that we decided to do in our initiative is to understand STEM from a non-STEM perspective. So we brought in the cultural psychologists, we brought in the sociologists, we brought in folks who do organizational theory, educational researchers who focus on race and racism. We even brought some folks in from public health, because we wanted to understand holistically what is happening to students who have to learn in these somewhat toxic environments, and what skill sets do they need, and what skill sets does the institution need in order to help them not just merely survive, but thrive. And the other thing that we did is we started with interviews first. And from the interviews, the in-depth qualitative data, we created the survey. And we thought that that was the right way to go, because this population is so misunderstood. First of all, I don't know how this is possible, but companies can't seem to find us, right? They don't know we exist. So our stories have been untold and undertold. And out of the interviews, we were able to create a survey. And one of the things that we were really interested in is how many PhDs can we convince to be faculty members to really make headway in the field. And out of 744, most of them wanted to be faculty. That's great. But we wanted to know, with the 159, why not? Why wouldn't you want to become a faculty? A faculty is a very honorable position. And if these numbers were switched, this would not even be a finding. So you expect many of the folks to have a general lack of interest, just want to do something else. But 71% talked about the norms and pressures of the academy, seeing their faculty stressed out and overworked and what they thought was underpaid, and the politics of the academy. How many hoops you have to jump? What kind of publications do you have to publish in? All of these things that can really be stressful and are sometimes hidden. But the one thing that I want to explore with the audience is there was a discipline specific rejection of the professorate. People thought that academic research was not really true engineering research, but instead, and it doesn't make the kind of transactional impact that they desired. And many of the PhDs of color within this realm also said that when you are a Black or brown faculty, you cannot afford to take a risk. And this is so unfortunate because engineering is all about taking risks, right? To get to innovation, you got to break a few things, right? And they felt as though if they took a risk and they failed, that their whole entire race failed. And they did not want to be in a position where they couldn't take risks and where their entire community would be penalized for taking a risk. Now, the majority of my talk is on underrepresented students of color, and Asian students wouldn't fall into that category. But the reason why it was so important for me to do research on Asian students in STEM as well is because the Black students kept saying, I wish I could be Asian, not to rid themselves of their racial pride, but they wish they could go into a classroom where they would be perceived as being superior instead of being inferior. And I said to myself, I wonder how Asians perceive that. So I did a study and I found out that they're both stressful positions. It is stressful proving yourself academically capable of being in a classroom. And it is also stressful being seen as innately good in STEM. And these stresses have very similar effects. People are depressed. They work unrelentingly. So there's some emotional distress as each group responds to these stereotypes. And to be model is not ideal, right? We all have varying ability levels and varying levels on tests. And to get a 90 to be called an Asian fail, this is not ideal for Asian students. But materially, Asians in STEM, particularly in tech, make 13,000 more than Blacks in tech. So materially, the stereotype of being innately good has a material value, and the stereotype of being innately inferior has a devaluing in terms of the material salaries of folks. The other thing that we also saw when we talked to engineering students and faculty is what we are calling equity ethic. This is a principal desire to decrease inequities through their engineering or STEM work. So many folks of color have experiences of racial discrimination and also have a very kinship communities where, you know, they have high rates of volunteerism, always talking to younger cousins and being called upon for your smartness to not just serve yourself, but serve your family and your community. Many students and faculty of color also talking about being empathetic. And I think that's something that we've lost in our society. Like we can't, you know, our empathy scale is very individualized. But these folks had not only empathy, but a understanding of the legacy, the shared legacy of being racialized in the society. And through that, they wanted to demonstrate through their engineering or beyond their engineering, STEM that reduces racial inequities. So this is why you have my brother Manu, who has a world-class biomedical engineering lab, but still spends countless hours teaching and paying the next generation of STEMers, right? This is equity ethic embodied. And this is not just my news story. This is the story of many STEM students and faculty. Speaking of faculty, I also want to say that we've uncovered that first of all, being a faculty member is hard. It's hard for anybody. Not going to deny that. But look at all these other expectations that underrepresented minoritized faculty have to endure. I know a particularly faculty member, world-renowned, publications out the wazoo, still has trouble recruiting white top graduate students into his research program. So we have to still contend with not only proving ourselves to our peers, sometimes we have to prove ourselves to our very own students. And then being diversity everything. If you're Black, you're on at least way too many diversity committees and being asked to do that. And many faculty feel a tug of war with that. Like, I want to represent for my people, particularly if I'm the only one, but I don't want to be tokenized in that particular realm. I don't want to just be chosen because I'm a Black person. And what does all of this do? So if you would have told me 10 years ago, maybe 7, that I would be talking about mental and physical health with high achieving STEMers, I would have bet millions that you were wrong. But yet here I am. So there are all kinds of things that happen to a STEMer when they meet these racialized, hostile climates, cultures, people, individuals, teachers, professors, etc. Even walking across campus can be a racialized adventure. In addition, many of these students are dealing with financial difficulties. They're dealing with constant premature death of their minoritized friends and family. And they're dealing with a host of stereotypes and toxic conditions. And I use the framework of John Henryism because one's response to that is to kind of work yourself to death. Maybe not a literal death, but sometimes it is a literal death. So you have Black middle class folks who live right next door to y'all who are dying 6 to 7 years before you do. Y'all shop at the same grocery store, might even go to the same church. So the quality of care you would think would be equal, but we know that there's racialized experiences on all levels of the class spectrum, and a response to kind of having that hard work and achieve means sometimes that you forget to do things like eat and sleep and get up from your chair, right? Which create this kind of loss of energy that are needed to be a holistic person. And the consequences are, feeling that you have imposter syndrome, that something is wrong with you when actually the culture is imposterous, right? But they have all these workshops to get us to breathe and yoga ourselves out of imposterism, and the system stays the same. You're feeling very powerless. You're feeling pressure to represent your group. So you don't want to get out of STEM, because if you get out of STEM, then what are you saying to the next generation? You feel as though you constantly have to prove yourself, even with the PhD. Like it's just like the crap never ends. You got a PhD from Georgia Tech. People still want you to prove yourself. So it's just this constant stress and strain. And there's a residue that you walk with as a result of having this constant, these stressors. Even the awards, are not, they don't counteract what happens, because they're often the diversity awards, the good Black person awards. So all of these things happen. Like I said, I couldn't explain everything on the slide, but I do want to just kind of break it down in one example. So here we interview 47 Black engineering and computing doctoral students. And just like being a faculty, being a PhDer is hard. It's universally hard. I'm not going to argue with that. But there's also a lot of racialized things that happen, and particularly to Black women, where they often have to deal with foreign-born professors where they don't look the women of color in the eye. They don't value them except for coffee runs. So, there's layers to this. And one of the responses by doctoral students of color is not dropping out, even though they get really, really close. But they kind of question themselves, not necessarily, am I smart enough, but is this the right fit? And if I'm going to have to deal with this for the rest of my life, like, is this my life? And they work twice as hard. Now, you're probably at this point, you've heard that before, and you're probably questioning, well, do folks really work twice as hard? The answer is yes, some do. And some think they do. And both are detrimental, right? So if you come into the mindset that you think you have to work twice as hard in order to get half as far as your white and some Asian colleagues, that is an allostalic load taking up from what should be the energy that you need to be creative and innovative in your field. And where does that leave us? All kinds of mental health complications and even physical health. Like, I remember a story of a girl being hospitalized for exhaustion, and her advisor said, well, you can study now, or you can do this task now, because all you're doing is laying in the bed. Just another young man having Bell's palsy, where a side of his face is paralyzed over stress. So this is not healthy. Even if somebody graduates with high honors, if they are going through this is not success. So we have to problematize our definitions of success to be more holistic. Now, the saving grace lately is, let's just have a mentoring program. Let's just mentor these students out of whatever, right? Kind of like out of themselves. But mentoring programs are not they have benefits. Don't let me not say that. I have a mentoring program, but they also can lead to stigmatization. They can be tokenized via diversity program. Oh yeah, these folks, they need a little extra because they special. It can uphold savior ideologies. There's a lot of cross-racial mentoring where your mentor is likely an old white man and you're a young Black male, and they think that they're saving you, and it really needs to be reciprocal, because you're trying to save STEM by not building so many freaking bombs and militarization and stuff like that. So they need to benefit from you as well, but it's being upheld as a savior ideology. And I want to say something about my own people, that sometimes when we talk to caring, trusted advisors, they say, I had to struggle. The struggle is real. You're going to have to struggle. Just suck it up and do it. And working oneself through struggle is not a key to success. Working oneself through struggle that is structural in nature is, without proper external supports, it's just another form of oppression. Let's stop telling students to be resilient and be gritty and rise up and face this 500-year legacy of structural racism through their bootstraps, And why is it the student's job to fix themselves while the institution remains the same? So that's my challenge to mentoring programs. But like I said, I have a mentoring program, and yeah, all those things that traditional mentoring programs are still important. Still need to know how to write a research statement, but you also need to know what it feels like to be racially isolated in your work life, because it's coming, or as a professor, because it's coming. What does implicit bias mean, and why is it not explicit bias? Like, when we talk about faculty and we talk about implicit bias, we're not talking about police officers, the need to make split-second decisions on someone's life or death. When you're talking about faculty, you're talking about people who study race and racism, or could study race and racism, and spend countless hours with their students. So some of that is just sophisticated racism that's happening. Not everything is implicit, and we shouldn't use implicit bias to make excuses for why you don't know that you are that you are initiating racism within educational places and spaces. So we talk about structural racism, we talk about all of that, and then we talk about, and still being a professor is the bomb. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is still the best job I've ever had in my life. I ain't going nowhere. I love it. So finally, in my last few slides, I kind of want to get at, okay, so what do we do? If you believe me up to this point, you know we have a problem, right? STEM has a problem. And there needs to be something dramatic to fix the problem. All right, so what you see here, this is my white male supremacy table, okay? Note the table. Here are the folks on the table. As you can see, it's very white male-ish. Got a couple of other folks. But if you say, you know, what about those 3% of Black folks who work at Microsoft? Okay, got you. Here's your table. So your table looks like this. And the folks of color are on the periphery, but they're at the table. But remember, the table is still steeped in white supremacy. It's STEM white supremacy, right? So some folks say, let's just break the table, right? It's not the people necessarily, it's the table, although we need to diversify the people. So breaking the table represents like a diversity training, diversity awards, implicit bias workshop, hiring a CDO, professional development for diverse faculty or employment hires. So those are good. I mean, not gonna say don't do those, but they create a rupture in the table. But in a few months, somebody's gonna come with some super glue and they're going to repair the table. So we just can't break the table. We must dismantle the table. Remember, curriculum made in Jim Crow just reinvented itself. Like, curriculum is still white, male, etc. Right? So we need to rebuild the curriculum table. We need to rebuild the foundation of STEM with folks of color and folks of different able-bodiedness, folks of different sexual orientation. I would even argue folks that are self-taught, because there's somebody that can break into your bank account right now that doesn't even have a degree. You know, I even appreciate the sociological experiences of homeless people. So we really need to think like broadly about who should be included in this table and why that person is extremely valuable. So now you have an inclusion at the table where the people have rebuilt the table for diversity, equity, change, coexistence, with the history, because you got to have the history, with community engagement, with equity ethic. And now you got to put the policies on the table, right? So we didn't build this table up. Table is nice and strong. How do we sustain it? We sustain it with the practices and policies. Now you say, reparations for Black people? Like, should that be STEM's job? Well, maybe. Yeah, maybe. Particularly because of the ways in which Black employees have been treated in STEM. So even when you make it to the tech companies or the faculty positions, you know, it's still a brutal existence. So why don't y'all just give us some reparations so we can start our own companies, so we can just continue to be brilliant, right? I truly believe, and I posit in the book, that we should be flying in our cars right now. And the reason why we're not is because we have the same people from the same neighborhoods who went to the same schools, have the same ideologies, and those are the ones who are creating STEM. And innovation is actually stifled. Look it up. So we are not doing as well as we should be doing, particularly with the kind of scientific investments that we have lately. So I want my people to go to Mars. I want my people to be flying around. I want my people to cure cancer, and I want my software to be Black and racially affirming. And that's just not good for my people. That's good for all people. So encouraging and having good recruitment and retention for a diverse, inclusive, equitable space is good for your dollar, right? It's just not good for me, it's good for you. So why don't people do it? But I know everybody's not ready for the revolution. Got you. So here's some things that you must do. And these are all outlined in my book. I'm nearing the end of my presentation, so I'm just going to talk about the first one. Now, if y'all want to know where the folks of color are in STEM, and you want to stop lying to yourself that first we don't exist or that you can't find us, come to our HBCUs, our Hispanic serving institutions, our tribal colleges. We are there. I graduated with hundreds of STEMers. What do you mean you can't find us? Do you want to find us? Do you really? Because we are here, we are out here, and y'all ain't hiring us. And I question to the extent that we should go work for you if you're gonna deny that we exist, right? What kind of life is that gonna be? So again, I'm down for entrepreneurship. You know, let's just do it ourselves. So like I said, I'm not gonna talk about all of these, but they're all outlined in my book that will be out soon. I hope you buy a copy and support a Black woman trying to support STEM to hopefully make your STEM education, employment, work life better. And for those of you who might not be able to support, I just want to tell you, I also have free resources. So please go to my website, blackengineeringphd.org, where it has lots of free videos about, you know, what it means to be a Black woman in engineering, just all kind of the history of STEM. And if you want to learn more about my methodological, the ways in which I've done my research, I would advise you to go to criticalscholarsforquantresearch.org. And it teaches us how to do quantitative methodologies without compromising Blackness or the nuance of the intersectionality. And with that, I will stop sharing and engage in some Q&A.
Awesome, thank you, Ebony. I'm happy to MC. I know Manu's still on for a couple minutes, but he might have to jump off. So Manu, if you want to jump in as well with any or lead any questions, please feel free and we can split it up.
I'll let you say the questions. Check your Twitter feed when you're done, Ebony. Everything I was hoping for and more. I learned so much. I'm going to throw the questions to Todd though, but I want to hear where you're going with it next. Okay, I'm still here. Go for it.
So much, Manu.
Okay, I just want to check. Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, yes, even for the couple of the comments coming in Q&As, I think this just dead on. And again, thank you on the heels of, I'm glad you led off with a traumatizing experience from yesterday and what continues on. And it's been painful with these as we hold these and wanting to have critical but important conversations. And yet each time this is on the heels of more and more events that are provoking exactly these conversations. So both for you and when Manu spoke earlier and others, I applaud you so much and thank you for the bravery, the courage, leadership that you show in this to really just help all of us be on the same page with this. It's just so critically important. So
thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. So I would let a couple populate in. I'm gonna jump around a little bit, so I'll try to get to as many of these questions from folks as I can. There was one in here I had, again, I tried to pick something I haven't heard before either from other ones and understand from the perspectives. One was, how do you feel about the use of BIPOC instead of POC?
Okay. So Black, Indigenous, people of color. I like it because it centers the folks of Black and Indigenous who have been the most marginalized. I know people say that, you know, the oppression Olympics, but it's something to be said about the people on the bottom, right? And their extreme forms of marginalization. But I also think about Lonnie Ganier's Political Race, where we all in solidarity come together. That's including Asian folks as well, who are also face the glass ceiling, the bamboo ceiling complex in their STEM careers, as being really, really more powerful. I think one of the things that stifles us is our lack of ability to come together under our shared forms of marginalization and conquer those, and then support each other's unique, individualized, racialized experiences. So I mean, I'm cool with them both.
No, that's what I would ask. Again, I think for all of us, understanding the distinctions, but also what is most appropriate terms and words to use. So as we have these conversations amongst these, and as you pointed out, the distinctions in different types of racism that different groups are facing. One here from one of our PhD students, as a PhD student who's asked to do the DEI work, but often not listened to, how do I get the faculty and leadership to do their part? I think this is unfortunately more common experience for many of our graduate students than we'd like to admit.
So this is, first of all, let me say, it is such a heavy burden on a PhD student just to get a degree in a STEM field. And on top, probably being voluntold instead of volunteer to be on a committee. And it's hard to say no to your faculty members. It's hard to say no to people who are responsible for you graduating. But I just think it is completely unfair. The best thing a PhD student can do is get their PhD. Like that's how we need you, because you have more power and more influence after the PhD than before the PhD. I think asking PhD students to do an inordinate amount of not self-initiated diversity efforts is first of all tokenism, and really doesn't understand the stress that they're feeling just being within their body at, you know, this environment, this place, this space, this time, you know, even having to deal with the atrocities that are happening across the country with Black folks. But I can't say to this PhD student, just say no, because saying no may be detrimental to their, you know, getting their degree. But I just want to let that person know it's very unfair, and I'm sorry that you're in that position.
I've seen it a lot myself, and I know that from graduate program ones and wanting to get diverse opinions and insights, but when you have fewer graduate students, it's placing an unfair burden on them to do more than their peers, and it's a constant sort of struggle, like you said. And even with initiative, it's as a advisor to students to say, is that really fair to this student to have to do that versus the other students in my lab? I've seen it firsthand.
And I mean, unless you're going to say that this is going to be part of your dissertation work, then, you know, a person, because I do believe that students of color want to be valued. So I think of like being on a diversity committee in two ways. Like on one hand, I want to do it because I am the only Black woman. On the other hand, damn, why am I the only Black woman? You know, and that's not my problem. That's the institution's problem. And why do I have to try to solve that problem? So yeah, it's definitely a catch-22 for me as well.
Yeah. Let me ask one in here, and again, I can tell you're a no holds barred type person, which I personally like a lot. This is from an anonymous one, but I'll put it out there. Why can't universities actually fire powerful, racist, old white men? I don't know how things can get better if they're still in power and have labs. I think you did a great job starting to introduce about how to dismantle the table, rebuild from those, which may be related, but maybe just from your perspective, because this is a big problem at all universities.
Okay, so I'm from the South Side of Chicago, so I don't know how to be nothing else than what I am, which is real and raw. And sometimes, yeah, not everybody can handle it. Sometimes I get uninvited to talk.
Won't happen here, I can tell you that.
Yes, we did good. I will say that I think my intention is to incentivize old white men to get with the program, because they're not going anywhere and they're being hired. Now they're just new white men. They'll be old one day. So, you know, the tables are still, in terms of the racial demographics, not in my favor. But if you told an old white guy or a new white guy, if you don't diversify your department, if your teaching evaluations aren't better with your students of color, you won't get that raise. You would be surprised how many people, fall in line. Now, I know that's not ideal. We're supposed to just say, look at what diversity does. It will make you a better teacher. Nobody cares. They're not buying it. Like I don't know, people are shooting themselves in the foot because your lab could actually be better and more innovative, and still you don't want to do it. Like, that's the strength of white supremacy. But if I tell you that your paycheck is going to be impacted, or you're not going to get this endowed chair, then you might act. And in that action, you might actually grow to understand the value of diversity.
Yeah, I love that from the way you put it. The incentive is incentivizing this, and that's a tangible thing. That's something that absolutely could be done. Tyrone, I think, has been patiently waiting here, and I want to shout out to a good friend again from grad school days, and who's been a role model for me as well. He's asking, you mentioned reparations for enslaved people. Is it possible the lack of generational wealth has played a role in the financial stress and constraints that you mentioned, and that how this has led, or has it contributed to the high attrition of people of color from STEM?
Absolutely. So the fact that we weren't able to buy homes or property, the fact that we weren't able to do so many things that those who are white. So this was state enacted redlining, state enacted bad health care. I mean, all of these things were sometimes federal policies that limit our ability to generate wealth. And federal, so the government did it, the local state and city officials did it, and you're telling me we can't get anything back from that? So we can't think about wealth without thinking about racism, and we really can't think about racism without thinking about capitalism, but that's like a whole nother topic. But absolutely they are connected. And even today, so the credit bureau, that gives you your credit score, the algorithm penalizes you for being Black. Did you know that?
I did
So
not.
yeah, so in the AI, your score, if you compare my score to your score, and let's say we had the same salary, same property, my score would be less than yours. So, and also houses in Black neighborhoods with the same ecosystem, so same amount of violence, same everything, are valued $11,000 to $13,000 lower than their white counterparts. So yes, wealth inequity has been detrimental, and we deserve to, even if they gave us reparations, we wouldn't be on equal footing, but we deserve something for our unpaid generational Black labor.
And the time, we're getting close, but I want to squeeze in as many as I can. I wanted to ask one here about genetics. This is one of the very specific ones, but genetics is a field most dominated by white supremacy and ableism. How can we change this? What language can we use to actually convince genetic researchers of the problems with highlighting biological differences between races or grouping people by genetic ancestry?
Okay, so this is not more for my forte, but I'm going to try to answer.
Okay.
So the DNA human genome experiment, the human genome in the early 2000s said that we are 99.9% biologically the same. And geneticists said, well, what about that 0.1%? So genetics is trying to make cancer Black, trying to make hypertension Black, and not really understanding the structural conditions on which people develop cancer or hypertension. You can't put Blacks in polluted neighborhoods and expect them to have the same outcomes. So, I mean, it's not my area. I would refer that person to Alondra Nelson, who wrote a fantastic book whose title I can't remember, but she really dives into this and could be able to give you a lot greater detail than I can.
Okay, thank you for that. Even just references like that, I think, to point people to get further information, education is great. Just want to scroll down, make sure I'm not missing any other really important ones in here. Here's one again. I think you spoke to this a little bit about the risks of these, and I know this from talking with faculty. So, what is your best advice for pre-tenure, underrepresented, minoritized faculty?
to expand your networks. So I am really fearful of junior faculty because they have less collaborators. They have less collaborations. And that's the thing that you really need. Trying to be on an island and just write, 13 papers a year is not going to happen. But your networks are not as expansive because of the good old white boy system, right? People tend to uplift their own, often to the detriment of people of color. Also, funding agencies are not, like if you say you want to do some equity ethic work or some work with diversity, many funding agencies don't see that as good science, right? So you want to diversify and innovate some kind of STEM technology to make it more culturally affirming, so you don't have soap that black folks can't use because you haven't, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
They don't think it's scientific. So we need to really change the structure of the funding agencies. And lastly, I want to say that just because a publication has the word diversity or culture or race in it does not make it not top tier, right? You got to stop devaluing our journals that affirm our academic and personal identities and self-inflating journals that are heavy quant or don't have no black folks on the board. But again, these are all problems that faculty of color, junior faculty of color face, but cannot do much about. So once again, the onus is on those who have been historically marginalized to kind of uplift themselves out of these structural barriers. So it's a really tough position.
Right. Just trying to make sure I didn't miss anything else. Some are similar, but I know there's some distinctions. I'm trying to make sure I capture as many different perspectives. I think.
I'm glad you're doing this for me, because
No, you can't do both. No, you can't do both. I mean, I also want to hear all of yours, so I'm trying to focus here and look over at the ones on the side and stuff. Sorry. One, as a first year faculty member, so again, I think speaking to some of the junior faculty here, Jemias Walton said, I have the pressure of doing a lot of things well right away. How do I spend the time needed to seek out high quality students of colors, example HBCUs, while doing what I need to do to start off strong on my pursuit of tenure? So I think it's this balance element, and probably, the feel of, to put a concerted effort feels like an addition or at expense of something else, and sort of that balance. But it's obviously something for many, and I think for Jemias asking is, this is a priority. So how do you deal with the balance part?
So the person is trying to do really good work and trying to recruit students of color at the same time?
That is, I think, what I took from the way it's worded, yes.
Okay. Well, our real job is to develop talent that we see in people that are up and coming, right? So I in my research, I don't see a disconnect between the two, because those are the people who are going to cite your work and challenge your ideas and help you grow. It's hard to exist without young, bright folks, kind of critiquing and collaborating and sharing with you. So, but how to do that and get students of color, that's a really, really difficult question, because if you ask so faculty, it's kind of on their plate to recruit folks, and the networks that are used in order to do that are the same networks. And then there's also a devaluing of the education at HBCUs, HSIs, tribal colleges. So it's a tough one. Can I take some time to think about it and get back with that person specifically? Because I want to give an answer, but I just need more time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, we definitely. And I think, I'm pretty sure with us recording, I think we can capture all the Q&A.
Okay.
If there's anything I'm overlooking or others, and especially if there's a name, I think it should provide the opportunity. You can do exactly that. We can reach out.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up. It's a good question.
Yep. I'm just seeing if there's anything else. Some of these were touched on, I think, in either earlier in your talk. It's good because there's a thumbs up for ones too, so that bumps them up to the top of the the list. So things are moving, so I'm sure I didn't skip over one as I go with these. I think one more include. I touched on this a bit, but one that stood out again from Tyrone and several folks on here is touching on how do you get white faculty to be more involved in making STEM more equitable and inclusive? So there's the incentivized part you talked a little bit, but I think other strategies, tactics, maybe to appreciate that as much as more than they currently are, at least.
So there's interest in diversity to make oneself look less racist. And then there's authentic anti-racist white co-conspirators. In STEM, those are very few. And the pushback I get with my white STEM colleagues is that nothing that I do in my research is racist, because they don't understand the structures. They don't understand that their stuff is not neutral. So it's a very different, I don't know. I don't know what we're going to do for STEMers, I just don't know, because they've been told so many times that their work is universal, neutral. Sorry.
No worries.
Yeah, that there's no bias. And those things are really, after someone tells you that for 40 years, it's hard to think something differently. So yeah, we need a task force. Give us a task force to figure that out, please.
Yeah, no, I had a feeling that was gonna be a no immediate, easy, simple, answerable one, but I definitely know where Tyrone is coming from with that. I feel, as a white faculty myself, it is easy to not easy. It's really forcing yourself to make sure you're not falling into those trappings, and to really question and look at things in a different way, and continuously, not just sporadically. So it is, and I think, as I said, the education's come about from anti-racism is something that, why is this the first time really I've heard that term so popularized in my life? Mm-hmm. That to me was a sort of, wake up to that.
And faculty are the hardest to retrain, because we think,
oh yeah, oh yeah, we are the first ones to contradict ourselves. Absolutely, mm-hmm. Absolutely. I know we're just a few minutes over. Really appreciate you being so generous with your time.
Absolutely.
I think that maybe one last one with this, because this one seemed to just bubble up to it, is maybe asking for more granular sort of. One of them says, I'm interested to hear examples of how you've approached conversations about explicit bias in teaching advising methods in a way that creates meaningful discussion rather than defensiveness. So maybe this is either a specific example, went well, didn't go well, as well, but just I think yeah.
So one of the ways that I've done this, these are all really, really great questions. They're really pushing me. Is, have you heard of the privilege walk, where you have to take a step back if you didn't have certain privileges, and a step forward if you went to a museum when you were young? I tried to show the faculty in my department how racist that privilege walk is, and it does nothing for the people of color, and it may not do anything for the white students in the class, to see that after the privilege walk is done, that the Black students are all the way in the back, like in the hallway, and white students are all the way up front. And then they look back to the Black students and they say, you're pretty far back there, highlighting that doesn't do much for students of color. So in essence, what I try to do is take current existing things that they do, which are racist or racialized and could be interpreted as racist, and try to re-instruct them. So I have a diversity privilege walk, where we privilege not if you have books in your house, but if you have books in your house with Black authors. Because if you don't have books in your house with Black authors, you're missing half of the game here, or indigenous or people of color. So I try to do it that way. And I think that has been really, really effective for me, to say the things that you are presenting in your classroom are racist. Here's how they're racist, and here's what you can do about it. But I want to warn folks, my title is Diversity in STEM Education. So I can get away with doing certain things behind that title that you may not otherwise, you may find more difficulty in doing. So I will acknowledge that I have a little privilege in that sense, where people are expecting me to talk about these things.
Mhm. Oh, that's great. Okay, I think since we're getting a little like 10 minutes over, stuff like that, I want to go ahead and I think start to wrap this up. But I'll try to make sure that anything I did miss, we capture for you. Some are several comments, or like I said, some of the questions sort of overlap with some of the things that you touched on in there. But yeah, this was just fantastic. Really, really sincerely appreciate just you spending the time with us. Looking through list of participants, I see a lot of folks from all over that were able to attend today. So to me, right there, that's a success that we've got with it. Spread the word enough, but I anticipate this will be viewed many times afterwards as well for anyone who unfortunately missed out, in my opinion.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate your willingness to engage in like really hard but necessary conversations like this.
You know, good people, good friends, they have big impacts on your life. And to know this and to hear more of the stories, I think that if we're not moved, then we're not feeling human right now, at least for me personally. So, but speaking of that, this is a great team effort. The group that Manu talked about at the beginning, and this being spearheaded by, we're helping with a lot of logistics by the communications team from Gladstone. But this network that's being built, I anticipate it probably continues to grow just based on seeing the kinds of impacts this can have. So my thanks as well is just, I'm just here to help facilitate and move things along. But really, it's folks like Manu and recruiting and identifying great outstanding speakers, and then folks like yourself who kindly share the time and help all of us. That that's where the meat of this lies. So
thank you, and it's really good that Manu really appreciates and values the work of Black women. So
yep.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yep, and that I've known him for so long. I know that's an authentic
Oh, that
feeling.
he is the real deal Holyfield. Like,
Yeah,
yes.
yes, he yes, he is. Yes, he is. So, well, thank you very kindly. Like I said, it's also always great with connecting with Chicagoans.
Okay, all right. All right,
Although
well, everybody.
I'm a Cubs fan, not a Sox fan, but it doesn't matter.
Well, I'll take you. Why not?
Well, we'll see. If they play the World Series this year, then we definitely know 2020 is going to be the end of time. So we'll see. Anyways, all right. So for all the non-Chicago folks, thank you very much, and really appreciate it. Please stay tuned again in about a month's time. We will be hearing from our next speaker, Tyrone Porter, who again is going to just be outstanding. So please join us again, not too long. We keep this series alive. Everyone have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.